right.
All right, guys. I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Ivan DeRoche, right?
Yes.
Sir, what outfit are you part of?
I'm part of the 403rd Wing, 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi. Most people know us as the world famous hurricane hunter.
I was kind of joking with him, saying he walks around with a bow and arrow just hunting hurricanes,
Yeah.
right? Is that now? There can't be that many units that do hurricane hunting, right?
Well, there's only one military unit. There
Yeah.
used to be more squadrons when active duty shared the mission, but in 1993 it became an all Air Force Reserve mission.
Okay.
And then NOAA has their hurricane hunters. They do atmospheric research worldwide, year-round, and they also go into hurricanes in their two P3s for some research. But our main job is the active reconnaissance of storms that threaten the U.S.
Okay. So that's the big difference between the P3 and the C-130 is you guys are getting real-time data or near real-time data
Near real
probably
time
from the storm.
Yeah, everything that we collect goes out on an average about every 10 minutes to the National Hurricane
Okay.
Center. So it's fresh when it gets there.
Yeah. Now tell us a little bit. You have the MC-130, or this is a C-130J, right?
WC-130J.
WC-130J.
So what makes it different than any other C-130J is we retain the navigator because we fly in bad weather. A guy primarily on the radar for safety of flights, big deal. And then we put some weather equipment in the back, a couple smart dudes that know how to use that stuff, and it turns into a WC-130 instead of a C-130. The weather palettes the plane can be deconfigured in about 6 to 8 hours. Everything can roll off, and then it's a standard C-130J ready for whatever cargo missions out there.
Okay. Now, how long have you guys been flying the J model for?
So they showed up at
WCs?
Keesler in 1998, and that began the test of the J model program. And we started flying, I think it was 99 was the first test for the Hurricane.
Okay, so it's been a while. Huh?
And then we went full up conversion from the H to the J when Katrina hit us in 2005. We were kind of using both planes for at that time, and then after Keesler got wiped out, and we just said, that's it, H models are gone, it's a J model game.
Wow. So did you notice pretty big difference going from the H to the J model?
There is
Especially
a big
in the storm,
difference.
right?
Well, we don't have the flight engineer anymore. In the legacy airplane, it was all steam gauges and dials. A lot of stuff to monitor. You know, the flight engineer was focused on systems. Well, all that's maintained by the mission computers now, and you get the ACAWS warning systems like most modern airplanes. So the flight engineer's gone. We did retain the navigator for safety of flight in the storms.
Yeah.
And then the performance is totally different. Engines are more powerful, of course. They're new, more modern. The propeller design changed from the old 4-blade Hamilton standard to the carbon fiber propeller, so they're much more efficient. And then the engine's obviously more efficient and more powerful. So our cruise speed's about 30 knots faster, but the big difference is the fuel flow. We're getting that at about 1,500 pounds an hour less.
Okay.
So that's significant.
So what's a typical either range or time frame that you're flying when you're doing a?
So if we're going for endurance, going to hang out and fly as long as we can somewhere, you can get a little over 14 hours with the externals. And our typical hurricane mission is somewhere around 11, give or take, hours.
Okay.
You know, it's very common to see 12, 12 and a half. We show 2 hours before. We brief. We do all our stuff, figure out where we're going, what we're doing. And then our en route time plus our 5 to 6 hours loitering in the hurricane and back.
Wow.
You know, it'll be a 12-hour mission.
So is that pretty fatiguing? So you're doing 5-6 hours inside the storm. What's that like flying a C-130 inside the storm?
That's the tough part to explain, because it's like, all right, aviation guys, continuous light, occasional moderate, and occasion holy crap. So it's obviously a lot of rain.
Yeah.
Hurricane flights are done at 10,000 feet pressure. So they're low pressure systems. The stronger they are, the deeper the pressure. So on the radar altimeter, our absolute altitude in a Cat 5 hurricane will be like 6,500 feet, even though the pressure altimeter is still saying 10.
Goodness.
But we fly standard weather altitudes. 9,900 happens to be one.
Yeah.
And we hang out at 10 because when we release the weather instruments through them, the weatherman in the back wants it to fall through that standard altitude. So we stay 100 feet above.
So do you notice is there a pretty significant difference between, say, a Cat 3 or a Cat 5 flying a hurricane, or is a hurricane and each one's got its own?
They all got their own name and their own personality.
Yeah.
So the things that really affect turbulence is any interaction with terrain. So when we're in the Caribbean, and we're at 10,000 feet pressure, but if you're flying something that's near Haiti where the mountains are 9,000 feet, You know, you get a lot of mechanical mountain wave type turbulence as a result of that. Those are the things when you're downwind of the mountains, you really need to think about that because it will beat you up just like mountain wave turbulence and it can damage the plane. But typically, it's sustained light for 5 to 6 hours, some moderate. You know, the eye wall area, the last 30 miles on your run in and your first 30 miles getting out of the eye, that's the most intense thunderstorms. It's the eye wall structure. Everybody's familiar with that. And that's the bumpiest. Well, we're only in it for 10 minutes. We're doing 3 miles a minute, 180 knots indicated when we're flying the storm. That's our rough airspeed. And so 10 minutes of the moderate to occasional severe in the eye is clear. You look up, you'll see blue skies during the day. You see stars at night. Yeah, yep. And then back in it for another thick 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then after that, it just depends on the banding of the storm and how physically large they are.
Yeah.
Some hurricanes, you know, the average hurricane, we fly 105 miles from our run-in into the center and then 105 miles outbound on the inner cardinal heading. So we'll start northeast, go to southwest. We always make a left turn and take the tailwind to the other corner and come back and do it again. So we'll do that 4 to 5 times in our mission profile. We're back in the center every hour and 30, 40 minutes, depending on how much tailwind you get on that crosswind leg. And most hurricanes, the hurricane force winds will go out maybe 50, 60, 70 miles.
Okay.
And then, you know, the TS winds drop off from there. Occasionally you get a storm like Hurricane Katrina. Massive. The hurricane force winds went out 125 miles. The tropical storm winds went out 175 miles. Yeah. So all of our standard, hey, how we treat a storm and we fly it, all that had to change.
So from a mission planning standpoint, are you getting that from satellite data, or are you literally just high-fiving with the crew before you to...
The best intel is the guys that are just getting out of it, you know, the data from the last storm. So a typical profile, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft are running 6 hours in the storm, 6 hours off, and 6 hours in the storm until it gets within 300 miles of U.S. coastline. And then the Hurricane Center wants us in there all the time. So we'll fly 6 hours and we're getting out and the next guy's coming right in behind us. So until it makes landfall or turns away and it's no longer a threat, we're always in it when it's within 300 miles of the U.S. coast.
Now you guys have a weather officer on board, correct?
Right. So the weather officer is an Air Force meteorologist by trade, and then they come to us, and there's no school for it, you know. So our squadron is the schoolhouse for the hurricane hunting. So whatever your crew position is, whatever mission training you need, it happens in-house. And weather officers are the tough ones. Because, you know, pilots, you send them to Little Rock to go through C-130J school, and then they just come to Keesler and learn a little bit about risk mitigation and flying through bad weather, and you get some on-the-job training in the hurricane, and then you're good. Well, the weather guy, it's totally different for them. You know, they're learning in the hurricane environment because all the Met systems are usually a weather station somewhere on the ground, where now you're in this moving thing, shaking, trying to take readings on screens that are, you know, vibrating and bouncing. So their job's different.
I love that you just said that the pilots come in, they learn how to fly in a hurricane. A couple weeks, they're good, you know. That's awesome.
Literally, you know, most of the pilots, when they about 90 days for mission training, you know, and literally that's just a couple weeks.
Well, and Colonel Ragusa was talking about, you know, there's no other replacement. There's no sim for flying through a hurricane, right?
No, there's not.
You just got to get in there and do it, right?
And the biggest thing is, you know, most pilots, you know, they pay attention to the radar to avoid weather. Well, we're paying attention to the radar with the nav to figure the softest spot to penetrate the weather the whole 6 hours. You know? Most people is like, I might have to cross a line, find the soft spot, or I might turn around and go the other way, deviate and go around it. Well, that doesn't work for us. You know?
That's amazing. So, and you guys are probably flying with a relief. So a relief pilot also, right?
We do our best. That's one of our risk mitigators. Is we try to take a third pilot so you can rotate through the seats and get some rest. But I mean, Air Force rules, we can have 2 pilots on a 16-hour crew day. And as long as both autopilots
standard mobility rules.
Yeah, standard mobility rules.
So you brought in some of the risk management. What are some of the risks, either through mission planning? What are those real risks that are, you know, to the crew, to the airplane when you're flying in a storm?
Okay. Well, lightning's a big one. We do get struck by lightning on occasion. The toughest part about lightning is seeing a signature on a radar. You don't have one. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of the eyeballs are used. Tough to see it in the day when you're IMC all the time. Nighttime, when you're making a run in on an active eye wall, it's like strobe lights. It's just
Yeah.
lightening up. You just know it's there. Lightning's a big one. The eye wall structure itself, you're gonna have to ask one of the weather scientists, but you know, there's vortices inside the eye wall similar to a small tornado, and they present as a hook echo. So obviously, you know, we're paying particular attention to make sure we avoid anything like that. And when a storm is dying, it's some of its most turbulent features in the eye wall, especially when it's getting filled in with dry air. The weather guys call it dry air entrainment, when dry air's coming in and killing the hurricane.
Yeah.
That's when it's some of its most turbulent times in the eye wall, is when it's dying like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Inside, we were taking the tour, and it looks surprisingly like any other C-130, like a slick C-130, except for those two stations up front.
It's exactly like
Yeah.
every other C-130J, except those roll-on stations.
Yeah.
They bolt to the floor, and you hook up the cable into the junction boxes on the side of the airplane, and now it's a WC.
And he does, and the Loadmaster does get to shoot up.
He does.
Shoot a cannon, right?
So they go through the Loadmaster training like any other C-130 Loadmaster. And then we do in-house training. They get trained to basically a basic weather observer level. And they drop the drops on, so they need to understand the weather code and whether or not it's good data that's coming back to the aircraft, and how to QC it and eliminate something that's really an erroneous data from the data stream.
That's great. So if somebody wanted to get involved, so you said it's essentially a reserve.
It's
a
all
unit,
reserve,
right?
Air Force Reserve, yes.
So if somebody wanted to get involved, would they, well, first of all, where would they go to find that? Probably just Google Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters,
Air Force
right?
Reserve, see, so we're military, so
Yeah.
you're going to have to deal with recruiters.
Yeah.
If you're coming in off the street, you're dealing with recruiters. If you're in the Air Force, then there's ways to be gained by another Air Force Reserve unit, whether you're transferring from active duty or Guard or Reserve. You know, guys inside don't know how to get to your unit. But outside, you're dealing with a recruiter, and because we're a small special mission, we also interview. I mean, people need to understand what they're getting into. I mean, it's not a job for everybody.
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, the only two special mission C-130 units I can really think of is you guys and the guys out of New York with the skis, right? Like,
Well, there's actually a couple more. There's guys that fly the firefighting missions. The Colorado Springs Air Force Reserve C-130s.
Okay.
They're a special mission. They do MAFS, the aerial firefighting. And the guys up in Youngstown, another Air Force Reserve unit, do the aerial spray for spray, like when they had the oil spill, spraying the things to dissolve the oil and stuff in the Gulf. They do aerial spray missions. So those are also Air Force Reserve special missions.
and that's exactly why we do this sort of podcast is, you know, I think every month I discover this new niche, this new corner of aviation where you go, man, that would be so cool to do that, huh?
Yeah, this is definitely different.
Yeah.
You know, did Colonel Ragusa tell you how it started?
No.
Okay, so in 1944, U.S. Army Air Corps guys are training Brits how to fly. You know, they're doing their basic pilot training during World War II down in South Texas. And there was a hurricane out in the Gulf, and the Brit pilot told Joe Duckworth, the Army Air Corps pilot, hey, I bet you can't fly that little T-6 Texan into that hurricane out there. And Joe Duckworth said, hold my beer and watch this. And that's how hurricane hunting was born. He and his navigator went out. They flew through the hurricane. They got into the middle of it, and they came back and they told the base weather guy about it. He's like, no kidding, really? And they took the weather guy for a ride. A little T-6 Texan, you know, single engine trainer.
Yeah.
And they came back, and that's the birth of hurricane hunting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, we always finish each interview with one question, and that is, if money was no object,
Okay.
and you could fly any airplane in the world, past or present or future, what would that airplane be?
You know, when I was a kid, it was always the Blackbird. You had to watch
Yeah.
the SR-71. It was really cool, you know. And I think that'd probably be the one.
Yeah.
I don't know. P-51 Mustang's pretty cool
That would be
too, if
pretty
you're
cool.
nostalgic.
Yeah, there's a couple around here in the Charlotte area, P-51s, and every time, you know, I'm trying to hand my card over there, see if I can get one. SR-71 Blackbird, you
Yeah,
know,
that'd be
amazing
cool.
choice. And I know there was just recently some articles about F-117s coming back, and they're still using them, so maybe there's still a shot.
Maybe a shot. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Awesome, sir. I
Yeah.
appreciate the time.
Oh,
Thank you
bet.
so much.
Anytime.